She thought she was doing the right thing. She had no idea she was about to change everything. It was 11:47 on a Tuesday night in January, cold enough in Vancouver that your breath came out in clouds and the rain had turned the sidewalks into mirrors reflecting neon. Maya Hendricks had just finished a double shift at the Harbor Diner on Granville Island. 12 hours on her feet, 43 tables. One very rude table of 8 who left her $6 on a $180 bill, and all she wanted was to get home, take her boots off, and eat cereal standing over the sink like a normal person. She was cutting through the alley behind the seawall when she heard it. Not a cry, not a scream, something worse, a sound so small it almost wasn't there, a whimper, the kind a child makes when they've been scared past the point of making noise. Maya stopped walking. She stood there for 3 seconds. She remembered counting, trying to talk herself out of it. It was nearly midnight. It was dark. She was tired and underpaid and she had a bus to catch. She told herself it was a cat. It wasn't a cat. The little girl was sitting between 2 dumpsters, knees pulled up to her chest, wearing a white wool coat that cost more than Maya's monthly rent. She was maybe 7 years old. Her face was chalk white. Her lips had a faint bluish tinge that made Maya's stomach drop, and she was clutching a small leather glove so hard her knuckles had gone the color of paper. "Hey!" Maya crouched down slowly, the way you do with a frightened animal. "Hey, sweetheart, can you look at me?" The girl's eyes opened, dark brown, almost black. She looked at Maya the way children look at strangers when they've been taught not to trust them. And then, because she had no other choice, she let her eyes close again. Maya caught her before she hit the ground. She didn't think. She didn't weigh options. She just caught the child and sat down right there on the wet pavement of a Granville Island alley and held her and said, out loud to nobody, okay, what do I do?" The girl's pulse was there but thin. Her breathing was shallow. There was no bag, no backpack, no phone visible, just that white coat and the leather glove. But when Maya shifted the girl's weight to free her own hand, something fell out of the coat's inner pocket and clattered onto the wet ground. A phone that looked like it cost more than Maya's car. Maya picked it up. The screen lit immediately, no lock. The last call made, at 11:21 p.m., was to a contact listed simply as D. Maya called 911 first. She stayed on the line with the dispatcher, who confirmed an ambulance was 4 minutes out. And then, because the dispatcher told her to look for ID, and because the phone was right there in her hand, and because the girl's breathing had gotten worse, not better, Maya did something she would spend the next 3 weeks second-guessing. She pressed call on D. It rang twice. Sophia. The voice that answered was low and measured and absolutely certain. Not a question, not a greeting. The kind of voice that says a name the way other men say don't. Maya's throat went dry. "This isn't Sophia," she said. "My name is Maya Hendricks. I'm on the seawall near the south end of Granville Island. I found a little girl. She was unconscious in the alley. I think she's sick or hurt. I've called an ambulance. She had this phone on her. I thought someone should know." Silence. Not the silence of surprise. The silence of a man recalculating. "Describe her coat," the voice said. "White, wool, good quality. Has little brass buttons on the..." "Don't move." A pause, and then something shifted in the background. The sound of a chair, of feet, of men suddenly moving fast. "The ambulance is coming. You stay with her until they arrive. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Maya said. "Because what else do you say to a voice like that? What did you say your name was?" Maya Hendricks." Another silence. Different this time. The kind where someone is memorizing something. "Stay with her, Maya Hendricks." He hung up. The ambulance arrived in 3.5 minutes. The paramedics took the girl, whose name Maya still didn't know, and put her on a stretcher, and one of them asked Maya questions she answered automatically while her brain ran the voice on that phone on a loop. They asked if she'd seen anyone else in the alley. She hadn't. They asked if the girl had ingested anything. Maya didn't know. They thanked her, and then the ambulance doors closed, and she was alone on the Granville Island seawall at midnight in the rain holding nobody's phone. Except she wasn't alone. She noticed the car first. Black, large, parked at the alley's entrance in a way that technically wasn't legal, but clearly nobody was going to say anything about it. Then she noticed the 2 men standing beside it, not moving, just watching her with the particular stillness of people who were very good at watching things. And then the door of the car opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, not in a noticeable way, but in the way that makes a room feel smaller. He wore a dark coat, no tie, his collar open at the throat, and he moved across the wet pavement toward Maya with the kind of controlled speed that said he was running while his body was walking. His face was sharp-boned and still, and his eyes, when they found her, were the same dark brown as the girl's. He looked past Maya first, scanning the alley, the dumpsters, the wet ground where she'd been sitting, cataloging. Then he looked at her. "You're the one who called," he said. It wasn't a question either. "Maya Hendricks," she said, because she'd already given him her name and there was no point pretending. "The ambulance just left. St. Paul's, I think, that's what they said." He nodded once. He was already looking back at his phone typing something. Then he looked up, again, and there was something in his face she hadn't expected from a voice like that. Something cracked just slightly open. "She was breathing?" he said. "When you found her?" "Yes, barely, but yes." He closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. "Thank you," he said, and then he got back into the car, and it was gone. If you're watching this right now and thinking that should have been the end of it, Maya goes home, eats her cereal, files it under Strange Tuesday. You'd be right, that should have been the end. Maya thought so too. She went home. She ate the cereal. She called her friend Dana at 1 in the morning and told her the whole story in 7 minutes. And Dana said, "Maya, only you," in a way that was half admiring and half despairing. She slept badly, but she slept. She went back to work Wednesday morning, and that's when it started to fall apart. She didn't know his name yet. She knew the voice, the dark coat, the car with the blacked-out windows, and the 2 men who stood like furniture outside it. She knew the girl in the white coat was named Sophia, because that was what he'd said when he answered, the certainty of it, the way it sat in his mouth. She knew nothing else, which meant she had no way of knowing, when she walked into the diner at 6:45 a.m. to start her breakfast shift, that the tall man already sitting in the corner booth, the one with his back to the wall and a black coffee in front of him, and 2 men in the booth behind him, pretending to read menus, was someone she'd spoken to 6 hours ago. She only knew when she looked at his face. He looked different in daylight. Harder, maybe. Or maybe just more visible, all the edges she'd only half seen in the alley now completely clear. He was watching her with a neutrality that would have been unsettling if she'd been paying more attention, but she was in work mode, apron on, already 3 tables behind before she'd even clocked in. She walked over. She pulled out her notepad. "Can I get you anything to start?" she said. Professional. Practiced. 2 seconds from the kitchen. "How is it?" he said. "That a waitress on Granville Island knows how to check a child's pulse and assess breathing in the dark." Maya put her notepad in her pocket. She looked at him for a moment. The diner hummed around them, coffee machine, low radio, Terry in the kitchen, swearing at a frying pan. "I took a first aid course," she said, 3 years ago, Red Cross, and I babysat my cousins every summer until I was 19. She paused. "How is your daughter?" Something moved in his face. Not much, but something stable, he said. "They're running tests." He looked down at his coffee, then back up. "You didn't leave the alley, you stayed with her the entire time." "You told me to," Maya said. "Other people have been told things," he said, "and done differently." He said his name was Nikolai Voss. He said it the way you say a thing you're not used to explaining, not because it was unfamiliar to him, but because he understood that to her it should mean something, and he was giving her the chance to react. Maya didn't react, because the name meant nothing to her. She was from Port Coquitlam. She worked 60 hours a week. She did not move in circles where the name Nikolai Voss was something you recognized on contact. She found out later that evening, when she Googled it, that Nikolai Voss was the name that controlled the Port of Vancouver, that the legitimate face of it, Voss Meridian Group, shipping and logistics, offices in a glass tower on Burrard Street, was wrapped around something else entirely, something that moved in the spaces between cargo manifests and customs delays and 3 a.m. phone calls. That when something moved through the Port of Vancouver, it moved because Nikolai Voss had allowed it to, or because he'd decided to demonstrate that he hadn't. She stared at her phone screen for a long time, and then, because she was Maya Hendricks from Port Coquitlam, and she had always been constitutionally unable to do the sensible thing. She went back to work on Thursday. He was in the corner booth again. "You looked me up," he said when she came over. "You knew I would," she said. "Yes," he said. "I wanted to see what you'd do with it." She poured his coffee. She looked at him. "Your daughter was poisoned," she said quietly. Not a question. She'd thought about it all night. The bluish lips, the shallow breathing, the way no healthy 7-year-old ends up unconscious in an alley at midnight wearing a coat worth $4,000. "That's why you're here. That's why you came back." The diner kept moving around them. Plates, voices, Terry's radio. Nikolai Voss set his coffee cup down. "You found her at 11:47, he said. "The man who was responsible for her safety that night clocked in at the port at midnight. His access card was used at a warehouse on Commissioner Street at 12:15. He had to have been somewhere else between 11 and midnight." He said all of this without changing his voice, the way someone recites facts, when the facts are the only thing keeping them from doing something that can't be undone. "I've been trying to understand how a 7-year-old girl ends up in an alley she had no reason to be in." "What does she say?" Maya asked. "She doesn't remember after the restaurant," he said. "We were having dinner. I was in a meeting." A pause. "She went to the washroom. She didn't come back." He said it flat. Maya heard everything underneath it. "The restaurant has cameras," she said. He looked at her. "The camera above the women's washroom corridor was offline that night," he said. "It has been offline, according to the maintenance log, since December 3rd. It is now January 14th. He tilted his head slightly. "It went offline the same week that a man named Gerald Ashford was let go from the restaurant's parent company after a contract dispute. Gerald Ashford, who until last September worked port security under my director of operations, Ian Mercer." Maya set the coffee pot down. She had the sudden, vivid sense of standing at the edge of something very large, looking down. "You already know who did it," she said. "I know the shape of it," Nikolai Voss said. "I don't yet have everything I need." He picked up his coffee, drank, set it down. "Ian Mercer has been with me for 11 years. He has access to things that make him very dangerous if he is what I now believe him to be. I cannot move without certainty. If I move wrong, he knows it, and Sophia." He stopped. The sentence finished itself. Maya understood then why he kept coming back to a diner on Granville Island, to sit in a corner booth and talk to a waitress he didn't know. Because the people in his world were either his or not his, and he didn't know which was which anymore. And she was neither. She was just a woman from Port Coquitlam who'd found his daughter in an alley and stayed. She picked up the coffee pot. "You need more than the camera footage," she said, making it a statement, not a question. "I need the phone Ashford used," he said. He was clever about his own devices. But men like that always contact someone when the job is done. They need someone to know they did it. He looked at her steadily. "Ian Mercer has a second phone. A personal one, unregistered. I've known about it for a year. I've left it untouched because knowing he had it was more useful than taking it. He keeps it in the inside left pocket of his jacket at all times." "You're telling me this why?" Maya said. "Because tomorrow night," Nikolai Voss said, "there is an event at the Pan Pacific. A dinner. Mercer will be there. So will 80 other people. And in a room full of men like him." He paused. "No one notices a waitress." Maya stared at him. "I am not a spy," she said. "No," he agreed. "You're better. You're invisible. And here is the thing nobody tells you about moments like this. The ones where a man with dark eyes and the weight of the Port of Vancouver behind him asks you to walk into a room full of people who do very bad things and do something very dangerous. They don't feel dramatic. They feel like a choice about whether to stay in the part of your life you already know or step into the part you don't. Maya thought about the girl in the alley, the white coat, the breathing that was barely there. She thought about the look on Nikolai Voss' face when he'd asked she was breathing. Just that, nothing else, and the 1 second he'd closed his eyes. "I want a contract," she said, "in writing, that you will cover any legal costs if this goes wrong." A pause. "Done," he said, "and I want to know her name. Not just Sophia." He looked at her for a moment. "Sophia Claire Voss," he said. "She's 7. She likes dogs and she is extremely opinionated about pasta." Another pause. "She asked the nurse last night if the person who found her was okay." Maya picked up the coffee pot and went to refill the table by the window. She came back. She looked at him. "I'll need a staff uniform," she said. "Something that fits." The Pan-Pacific dinner was a fundraiser for a children's hospital. The particular irony of it was not lost on Maya as she moved through the room with a tray of champagne flutes, keeping her shoulders square and her eyes forward the way you learn to do after 10 years of service work. Present enough to do the job, invisible enough that nobody looks at you. She had spotted Ian Mercer within 4 minutes of entering the room. Nikolai's description had been precise. Mid-50s, silver hair combed back, a way of standing that suggested he was used to being obeyed. He was near the bar with 2 other men, talking with the loose confidence of someone who believed, completely, that he had gotten away with something. Maya had done the job in service long enough to know how to read a room. She knew which men would grab her elbow. She knew which ones would look through her. Ian Mercer was the second kind. She walked past him 3 times with the champagne tray, and he registered her the way you register a piece of furniture. Useful, negligible. The 4th pass, she stumbled. Not badly. Just enough. Champagne tray tipping, 1 glass going over, her hand going out to catch herself against Ian Mercer's arm. A flurry of apologies that she'd practiced in her bathroom mirror for 40 minutes. He made the face men make when an inconvenience touches them. He looked away. She had the phone in her jacket pocket before he finished looking away. She kept moving. Through the room, into the corridor, past the coat room, through the service door, and into the stairwell where 2 of Nikolai's men were waiting. She held the phone out. One of the men took it, looked at it, spoke into a radio. And then Nikolai Voss was there, coming down the stairs from the floor above, coat on, unhurried. He took the phone, looked at the screen. Something crossed his face. Not shock. Something older and colder, the expression of a man who'd half hoped to be wrong. 15 messages, he said quietly to himself. He looked up at Maya. "You should go home," he said. "Is Sophia safe?" she said. "She will be." A pause. By morning. Maya believed him. She didn't want to examine too carefully what that meant, or what by morning looked like when Nikolai Voss said it. She had a first aid card and a Red Cross certificate, and she had already crossed more lines tonight than she'd crossed in her entire life. She went home. She sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the fridge, and she ate cereal out of the box, and she called Dana at 2 in the morning and said, "You're never going to believe what just happened." And Dana said, "Maya, I swear to God." 3 days later, a car was waiting outside the diner when she finished her shift. The man who opened the door was the same one from the alley, the same one from the booth. But Sophia Claire Voss was there too, in the back seat, in a blue coat this time, looking at Maya with those dark eyes that were so much like her father's it was almost startling. "You're the one who stayed," Sophia said. It wasn't a question. She said it with the directness of a 7-year-old who had decided something. "I am," Maya said. Sophia nodded, with the gravity of someone rendering a verdict. Nikolai Voss said nothing for a moment. He was looking at his daughter. Then he looked at Maya, and some of the controlled neutrality that lived in his face like architecture was simply gone. Not broken, just set aside. "I told her you were the person who called for help," he said. "She has had some thoughts about what thank you should look like. I made you something," Sophia said, and held out a drawing. Maya recognizable by the apron and the coffee pot, and next to her a small figure in a white coat, both of them under what appeared to be a very enthusiastic sun. Maya took it with both hands. She looked at it for a long moment. "It's the best thing anyone's ever given me," she said, and meant it completely. Nikolai Voss was watching her. When she looked up, he held her gaze for a moment, not the evaluating gaze of the alley, not the careful gaze of the booth, something else. The gaze of a man deciding something that has nothing to do with strategy. "We're going to the aquarium," he said. "Sophia has requested sharks." A pause. "You're welcome to come." Maya looked at the drawing, looked at Sophia, looked at Nikolai Voss, who controlled the port of Vancouver and had just asked her to look at sharks on a Thursday afternoon. "I get off at 3, she said. "I know," he said. "And if you're watching this right now, if you found this video at midnight on a Wednesday, if you're someone who stayed when you could have walked away, if you've ever done the right thing in the dark, when nobody was watching and wondered if it mattered, I want you to know that Maya Hendricks kept that drawing. She framed it. It hung in her kitchen for the next 4 years. Through everything that came after, the truth about what happened at the port, the choices she had to make. The things she learned about herself and about the particular kind of courage it takes to stay in a story that isn't yours and make it yours anyway. It wasn't a safe life. It wasn't a simple one. But it started in an alley on the seawall on a Tuesday night in January when a tired waitress from Port Coquitlam heard a sound too small to ignore and decided to stop walking. She thought she was doing the right thing. She was. If this story kept you company tonight, hit that like button and subscribe to Ella's Romance Library. There are more stories waiting, and every single one of them starts with someone choosing to stay. Drop a comment below. Would you have picked up that phone? Because I think the answer says everything about you. See you in the next one.